Hello, everybody, and welcome in. It is a special edition of Out of the Tunnel. Nick will be joining me here shortly. Actually, he just joined in now. Uh, and we're going to be here. We're walking you guys through everything that happened yesterday. We're going to get you ready for the ranking reveals to come out. We will give you our live reaction as that does happen. We're very excited to see this. It's going to be a very, very fun afternoon. Um, Nick, we've been debating all morning already, talking about what we think is going to happen. What a way for the 14 playoff to go out, though. I mean, for it feels like for the past couple years, like we've had a hard time deciding on 4 teams that should be in there. And this year, we were talking earlier, it feels like we have 6, 7 teams that have a rightful claim to get into these playoffs. Just your overall thoughts on that before we start, debating who should be in, who should be out, and so on.
Yeah, first of all, for the people that can you hear me? I guess I forgot to ask that. Oh, is my Wi-Fi being done?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, all right. Little lagging behind here, I guess. But for the people that believe that these top tier sports are scripted, I mean, this looks like a justification for the 12-team playoff. And I know we don't all necessarily see it that way. I apologize. I'm trying to bring it up on my phone because my TV's being dumb. But yeah, I mean, last night, really all weekend, just causing havoc. Everybody was talking all week about like, what if this happens? What if this happens? Texas kind of solidified themselves as being in the conversation, and then Bama goes out, beats Georgia. And I know we as a podcast have kind of had our doubts about Georgia this year. I'm just going to start. I'm going to pick something at the beginning of the season, and I'm just going to stick with it all season. I don't care what a team looks like because I probably was the biggest doubter in the podcast about Georgia. I finally was sold on them, fully bought in, and they turn around and end up beating Bama. So I got to figure that out for myself. But no, as far as the college football playoff uh, committee is concerned, this is at least the most difficult decision they've had in the past couple years. It's hard to tell. We talk about the inconsistencies of the college football playoff committee all the time, and they're going to show today. I'm almost certain of it because we've seen what they've done with what we thought were easy choices, and now they have difficult choices to
Mhm.
make. So God only knows what these top four teams are about to look like.
Not sure what happened there. My computer decided it wants to act up today. But yeah,
Mine is
I
too.
mean,
Don't worry.
this is going to be a very long. We're, yeah, we're waiting. We got 10 more minutes until the selection show starts, and then who knows how long they're going to talk before they finally get to the rankings. But like I said, we will be here live as all that comes out. We'll be giving our genuine reaction as that happens. Um, Before we start looking at resumes and giving you our picks that we've already made, I just wanted the AP poll has come out, and maybe that gives us an idea as to what the committee might do. So the top four, according to the AP poll, is Michigan, Washington, Texas, Florida State, Alabama 5, Georgia 6, Ohio State 7, and Oregon is eighth. I do want to talk about the group of five, and we can talk about that in a little bit. Who we thought the representative is going to be there. Um, and we'll get to that in a minute. But let's go ahead and we are going to take a live look at or excuse me, not a live look, but we're this morning, as I said, we made our picks. This is who we believe the four best teams are, and how we rank them accordingly. Um, you and Slade both picked Michigan as your number one team. I put Washington at number one. I think Washington has a better resume than Michigan. They beat Oregon twice, undefeated. And again, I feel like a slightly better resume than what Michigan has. So I think Washington is the best team in the country right now. Texas at number three for all of us, and then all of us put Bama at number four with that head-to-head victory for them. Nick, what went into your decision to put these 4 teams as your best 4? Again, this isn't what we're saying the committee is going to do. This is just who we believe are the best 4 teams.
Yeah. So first of all, I think Michigan or Washington could have been interchangeable. One or two really didn't matter for me. I gave Michigan the slight edge just because of their ability to just line up on the ball and run down Penn State and Ohio State's throats. Texas and Alabama. So obviously, I kicked Georgia out because of the loss to Alabama. This was an Alabama team that we had doubts early in the season. They took that loss to Texas, and we kind of we didn't know where they were going to go. They figured it out. Saban righted the ship, and they've looked great ever since. A lot of people believed that they were going to beat Georgia, and obviously they went out, did it. I think that based off of you're playing in the SEC, which is I wouldn't say easily the best conference. I think depending on the year, arguably Big Ten. But I think this year, with the way the things shook up, I think the SEC is the best conference. And they kind of went out, showed it, won the conference championship. Yeah, they got one loss, that loss to the team right above them. And really, to me, you know, when I watch, we got into a conversation earlier about Florida State. And as much as I would like to see, I picked Florida State to make the college football playoff. So as much as I would like to sit here and say, yeah, undefeated conference champions, they deserve to be in here. We've talked about it all week. Deserve versus best. Um, and when I watch how Bama played, when I watch how Texas played all season, Florida State, I brought up the fact this morning, even if Travis played these last couple games, now it would have depended on what he looked like during those games. But yeah, they would have deserved to be in here for sure. But I just don't, even with him playing, I don't know if I could have said without a doubt that Florida State is better than Texas or Alabama right now. So that's kind of why I went with that. Again, Washington, it could have been number one for me.
It's
Um, Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, so I mean, if you look at Florida State's schedule, they've played 2 SEC schools. And
Right.
I feel like that's rare, and if you look at it across the board, the ACC and the SEC have had 10 games against each other this year. The ACC is 6 and 4 in those games. And
Mhm.
so I mean, I feel like a lot of people are in denial that the SEC is having what I feel like overall is a down year. I mean, again, I'm not
Right.
saying they're the worst conference out there, but I don't think enough people are respecting, yeah, the ACC didn't have a great year either, but when you have 10 games head to head with an ACC and the SEC, and you have a winning percentage, I think it's fair to say that you have a slightly deeper conference or better conference across the board than what the SEC does this year. Um,
Right. And the only
the
reason
2
I give the
teams
edge to the
that
SEC is the top
yeah, the 2
heaviness.
teams
That's
that
that's
for
really
or, yeah, Florida State beats. Go ahead.
no. You're good. That's all. That's all I want to say.
Mhm, yeah. But all I'm gonna is and everybody's saying, well, Alabama, they scheduled, they had a difficult schedule, and yeah, they lost that game, but they proved themselves for the rest of the year. Well, Florida State gave themselves a difficult schedule. They scheduled LSU their first game of the year. It was a difficult start to the season for them, and they handled LSU on a neutral site. It was still in Florida, but it's a neutral site. They handled LSU pretty good, an LSU team that we think has the Heisman winning quarterback on it, and so on. And so I feel like we're kind of discrediting that win from FSU and just saying, well, yeah, look how they played late, without their star quarterback. And here's and I've been saying this, to you guys all morning, and I said this the past, 2 weeks, ever since the Jordan Travis injury. You can make an argument for Florida State to be kept out based on resume. I'm not denying that fact, or that argument. There's an argument there. And that's what we're here to talk about is their resume, their eye test, all this other stuff. The second you bring up the Jordan Travis injury, though, in this debate, that's not how this works. It's not, well, if Travis would play, they would have a better shot. And then again, that's a debate, but you can't put a team in or keep a team out because a player is hurt. That's they played 2 weeks now, 2.5 weeks essentially with a backup quarterback, even their third string quarterback last night. They're still winning. And at the end of the day, I feel like that should winning matters. And just the one thing I want to put across and get extremely clear is I think once you bring up the Jordan Travis injury as part of your argument as to why Florida State should be kept out, I feel like that argument becomes invalid because we can't use injuries. And I brought this point up, when we were texting earlier. It's like, well, hey, Texas had a bunch of injuries. Like, are we going to turn around now and say, well, they're down their star running back, their wide receiver got hurt yesterday. Well, that's two injuries. So, does that mean Texas is going to be that much worse of a team, and therefore they should be kept out now too? I just don't think that's how it should work. And again, we can talk resumes and everything else, but for everybody else out there debating, well, the Jordan Travis injury hurts them. That's not an argument. It's not a valid argument in my eyes as to who should get into the playoffs and who should be kept out. Um, so these are the four teams that we think are the best right now. And then we also picked who we thought the playoff committee is going to put in. So these are our predictions for what the college football playoff committee will do. Slade went Michigan, Washington, Florida State, Texas. I went Washington, Michigan, Texas, Alabama. Nick, you go Michigan, Washington, Florida State, and Texas, pretty much the same, or exactly the same as Slade. I'll let you expand on your thoughts with what you think the committee will do here.
Yeah, so you said it perfectly when we were texting back and forth. Based off of the guidelines that the committee laid out, I don't believe. Now, again, committee can be inconsistent, um, but based off of those guidelines, I don't think that they plan on leaving Florida State out. Again, conference championship, undefeated. That's what the committee says that they're looking for. Um, and I don't hate
Mhm,
Florida State being in either way. Florida State, literally in my list of top four there, Florida State was five, and I could see the argument either way. To put them in and bump either Texas or Bama out. I kept Bama out of the committee's rank or top four, because the committee had them at eight, and I understand that the committee also had Georgia at the top, but just the committee and the way that they like to do these, I don't see them bumping Bama the whole way up four spots into that top four again,
mhm,
because I'm positive that they're going to keep Florida State in. Texas, manhandled Oklahoma State, to win their conference championship. I think that's what kind of gives them the edge again. In this ranking, I have Bama five here. Um, or I have the committee putting Bama at five. But really, I mean, this is why we're on here talking about this. This is why we love college football, because, like you said, there's six teams here that you could argue. I've seen Twitter all morning saying about how you can't take Georgia out of the top four for one loss. Um, which I can understand where you're coming from on that too. But at the end of the day, when you're looking at resumes and how they stack up, I think this loss to Alabama was crucial for Georgia, because really this is the game that they needed to win to solidify themselves as what the committee was saying was the best team in college football, and they didn't do that. Um, and really, that's going to end up being their downfall. I don't see the committee. I understand Twitter thinks, but I don't see the committee keeping Georgia in, unless there's some kind of behind the scenes, you know, knob slobbing going on. But I just, when I think of the committee and the guidelines that they laid out, this is what I think, based off of those guidelines, that they will say.
yeah. No, I 100% agree with you. I don't think you can and everybody's pointing to, well, Georgia's the two-time defending national champion, and they had a 29-game winning streak. First of all, to the national championship point, you're right. They were back-to-back national champions, but that was in the past. You can't continue to look at, well, this is what they did last year and the year before, because this is a different team. That's been very clear all season that, while they do have a decent amount of seniors on there and returning players, it's a different team. And it's not the same team that went out and won those national titles the last 2 years. But with the field that we have this year, with these 4 spots and like we're talking about, these 6 teams trying to fill those 4 spots, I don't think you should be put in there if you're missing that conference championship. Since from the beginning of the inception of the 4-team playoff, it is the playoff committee made it very clear that they value conference champions over anything else. Remember, the Big 12 was held out a couple years at the beginning because they didn't have a true conference championship game it was decided by who had the best record and tiebreakers, and then we got a Big 12 championship game, so that way they were no longer being left out. And now to kind of reverse course when we have 5 one-loss Power 5 champions, I don't think it's fair to put a one-loss non-Power 5 champion in over those schools. And again, especially because Alabama just proved they're the better team, so you can't put, Georgia in and leave Bama out because I feel like that's what we're talking about here is leaving one of the SEC schools out. I don't think you can leave the SEC school out that just proved that they are the better team on the field. Um, I did put together here are the resumes for the 4 schools that are kind of being debated here for those final 2 spots. I'm going to first talk about Texas because I think Texas is the most safe team here, at least in my opinion, with a head-to-head win over Alabama. If the committee suddenly devalues that after they've honored that all the past couple of rankings, I think that'd be the biggest travesty that the playoff committee could do. Um, Texas beat them head to head on the road by 10 points. And honestly, we talked about it all year. They probably should have won that game by more than 10 the way they looked. They made some mistakes in the third quarter, let Alabama hang around. Well, now Alabama has turned around and they beat Georgia. So they have a win on the road over the SEC champion. If they suddenly devalue that just because Texas, hit somewhat of a slump there towards the middle of the season, and I think they've looked very impressive the last 2 weeks to say the least. They won by 50 points against Texas Tech. And then they dominated Oklahoma State yesterday. I think Texas is the most safe team here. But looking at everybody else's resume, Florida State has 3 ranked wins over LSU, Clemson, and Louisville yesterday. Alabama 4 when you add in the Georgia game, and Georgia has 3 ranked wins: Missouri, Mississippi, and Tennessee. I have their strength of schedule in here. Georgia has the second worst at 58. Florida State is 63, and Alabama is 17. If you look at strength of record, Florida State is third, Alabama fourth, and Georgia seventh. So looking at this resume, because again, and this is what we've been talking about all morning in our group chat when we were texting, is the battle cry this year for who we're going to put in has been, well, do we want the 4 best teams or the 4 most deserving teams? And we were talking, and that's such a subjective um, comparison because again, when you try to make your claim for who you think the best team is, it's subjective to you. You might use your eye test, you might use a resume, and therefore it reverts right back to being the most deserving team. And so, but looking at this resume, just and if you want to go back to like I said, what we were talking about this morning with deserving versus best, and add your thoughts on there.
Yeah. So real quick, I forgot to click over to the comments to see who was commenting on our video here, and I just want to give a shout out to Evan Kramer. I think he's found a good solution here. He says put Bama and Texas in, and let Florida State and Georgia play in a bowl game, and then if Florida State wins, they can claim a national title. I like the sound of that. I think that solves a little bit of everything here. But no, I just want to give a shout out to Evan real quick.
Steve,
Um,
I mean, I appreciate Evan because he's been a very loyal TikTok follower and he's been commenting on our stuff and loving that stuff over there. So we appreciate that. Here's my, I guess I would say, problem with that is so that worked for UCF a couple years ago. Remember, they went undefeated. They got kept out of the playoffs. Then they beat Auburn in the Peach Bowl. But the reason that they could, somebody voted them a national champion in some poll, but the reason they could also claim that is Auburn had beaten Alabama that year, and then
mhm,
UCF turned around and beat Alabama. Whereas if Florida State would go to this bowl game and they beat Georgia, well, Georgia lost to Alabama. So the
right.
same, like I feel like Florida State would need to win that game by like 10 plus, for that to be a legitimate claim. Well, and again, it's not a bad idea. I would love to see Florida State and
Yeah.
Georgia in a bowl game matchup. But that would be, I guess, like the sticking point or the argument against that is just because Alabama beat Georgia, and then Florida State turns around and does the same thing. So, but anyway,
Right.
back to your
Yeah.
thoughts on the resumes and everything.
Yeah. So I uh, just glancing at this, just peeking at this, not really staring into the numbers too much. The big thing that sticks out to me here is Bama and Florida State. Um, I look at some of those numbers, and I'll start with Florida State: 31 ranked offense, 19th ranked defense. Now I know we can't just stare at those to determine who the better team is, but those numbers jump off the page because when I look at, say, Georgia, for example, both of those are in the top 10. Bama, 48th ranked offense, 16th ranked defense. Those numbers are kind of high. Obviously, they probably average out to somewhere about the same as Florida State does. And then Texas, 14th offense, 17th defense. Um, so what I'm getting at here is there's a reason that we don't just stare at these and choose the best team because in
Mhm.
my eyes, looking at this says that Georgia is the better team if we're going off of where your offense and
Right.
defense is ranked is. Um, so obviously, like you said, it takes eye test. And not to say that you or I are good enough at watching college football to know what the hell we're talking about, but that's why you can't have a most deserving versus best clear cut black and white right down the middle decision when it comes to these things. And a lot of people they can have their opinions and they can judge the committee. I've had words of choice for the committee before. I get it, but it's not that simple. These people, especially this year, have a very difficult decision on their hands. And but looking at these resumes, and if we're just talking most deserving, we're not talking game film, eye test, none of that. When I'm looking at these again, the top two are clear cut. That's these are the
Mhm.
four teams in debate here. Um, when I'm looking at these, one thing I notice is Texas number one strength of schedule, number five strength of record. On this board, those two numbers are easily the best, and that's why I agree with you. Texas is the safest out of the three of these teams. The debate is really the three other teams on this list with them, and Florida State. A lot of people. This is why strength of schedule and strength of record. You got to take both into account because
Mhm.
Florida State's strength of schedule obviously is the worst on here. Georgia sitting just ahead of them at 58, but number three strength of record. And when we're talking again, this is why the whole Jordan Travis injury thing doesn't matter, or shouldn't matter. I should say to some people it does matter, but that number three strength of record backs up your undefeated conference championship. And Alabama, their strength of schedule number 17, number four strength of record. Um, that it's obviously that strength of record is just behind Florida State. And again, that's that basically looking at this is where I take Georgia and I say, okay, Texas is safe. Georgia, when I'm looking at just these resumes, I have to put you behind Florida State and Alabama. And then it's Florida State and Alabama, head to head on who's getting that fourth spot for me. And obviously, I took Alabama instead of Florida State, and that's really where you have to come down to that eye test. That's where I believe I see the biggest difference. In Florida State and Alabama. Again, I think even if Travis was playing, if he played like I had seen him play the rest of the year, I still don't know if I could have put Florida State above Bama. Yes, deserving wise, they deserve to be there. But at the same time, Alabama just beat your two-time defending national champions that you want to sit there and hype up so much and say, well, they still deserve to be in. Um, and that's really kind of counterproductive to everybody's argument about Georgia. Like, yeah, they're again, that's last year. That's the year before. That none of that matters anymore. We're not talking about if national championships or Super Bowls, for example, determine how good of a team you are. The Steelers would be up to like 10 right now. The Patriots would be up to 13. Whatever. Like that's
Right.
all past shit. It don't matter. And that's really why I gave the edge to Alabama was exactly how I just explained. Texas was the safest. I eliminated Georgia, based off of their resumes. And then it came down to the eye test for me on whether it was Alabama and Florida State. And while Jordan Travis's injury isn't a direct corresponding or correspond, yeah, that even though that isn't something that directly corresponded to my decision, I
Mhm.
have to look at how they played before his injury, how they played after that injury, and how Alabama's played throughout the season. If you would have asked me week 4, which one of these two teams I thought was better, I would have said Florida State. But this isn't a 4-week season. This is a 12-week season plus a conference championship game. And that's why I had to put Alabama above Florida State.
Yeah. One thing I want to talk about real quick, and we briefly talked about this yesterday, but it was more of a hypothetical. Well, it became very real with SMU beat Tulane yesterday in very convincing fashion on the road. So I stacked their resumes head to head, and like I said, if we look at the AP poll jumped SMU ahead of Liberty. And again, that's the AP poll and the college football playoff poll are very different. I understand that, but it it could possibly be a precursor. And so this is I feel like an underrated topic. Everybody's focused on the playoff. You know me, I love my group of 5 football. So I just want to talk about this real quick before we get lost, in all the updates going on with this. And this is one thing I definitely wanted to talk about before those rankings come out. Who do you pick out of this? Because like I said, SMU has a very convincing win. Liberty is the undefeated team. They've been ranked ahead of SMU hasn't been in the playoff rankings at all yet. Liberty has been in there the past couple of weeks now. Do you see any way that the playoff committee takes what SMU did and jumps them over Liberty? While Liberty has this undefeated record, they looked very impressive Friday night. We look at these strength of schedules. While SMU's is not great, it's a little bit better than what Liberty's is. They have two what I would call good losses: a close game at Oklahoma, and then on the road, it wasn't close against TCU. I think it was a 17-point game, but still Power Five losses. Whereas if you look at Liberty, they didn't play any Power 5 teams, but they did play all FBS opponents this year, and I give them commend them on that, because especially at that level, I feel like it's really easy to go out and grab, an FCS team, throw them on their schedule. They didn't do that. Who do you have being the Group of 5 representative in the New Year's Six this year?
Yeah. To me, this could be justifiably just as difficult as making a pick for the top four. Um, you know, SMU definitely deserves credit. They've played a hell of a season. They deserve to be having this conversation had about them.
Mhm.
But when I look at this, the strength of schedule to me um, isn't, yes, obviously SMU played Oklahoma, TCU. But when I look at Liberty, when you're talking about a group of five team, and I mean, we look at Bama, Georgia, Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan. These are group of five teams, very well respected, very good group of five teams. And they're scheduling 2, 3 FCS teams a year. So for Liberty to be able to go 13-0 and to not play an FCS school, um, to me that's huge, because we see some of these big teams, they'll play an FCS school and sometimes they might struggle. We talked about it early in the season, Michigan and Ohio State. Yeah, they were winning these games. Yes, some of them they were winning by 3, 4 scores, but when you watch the game, you watch the film, those 3, 4 scores aren't always as clear cut as what the box score might say. So for Liberty to come out here and schedule 12 FBS opponents, yeah, around the same level as what they are, again, not playing Power Five, but playing Group of Five, and it's difficult to go 12-0 in college football. I don't care who you're playing. Now, obviously, if you're Georgia scheduling 12 FCS teams, yeah, that might be a little easy. But to be scheduling opponents that are at least within the same range as you are, as far as the tier classes of college football, um, and you schedule those and win all those, and then turn around and win your conference championship, that to me would be the kicker to put them just above SMU. But I could definitely understand, the argument the other way of why SMU would be, in someone else's eyes, the better team.
I'm gonna go with Liberty here. I mean, we looked at strength of record for the 4 teams contending to get into those last 2 playoff spots. So if we do the same thing for these guys, it's very close again, kind of like their strength of schedule. SMU is 19th in strength of record. Liberty is 14th. Again, with them being undefeated, I just find it hard for the committee as much as they value Tulane and a win on the road at Tulane. Maybe I don't see them quite getting ahead of Liberty. I see Liberty, kind of being. I would say probably it's going to come down to one spot in my eyes, but I think Liberty's going to get it. So let's go back to this. We're still waiting for the rankings to come out. They're currently talking to all the analysts hanging out at the schools right now. So we're waiting with bated breath, and of course, as I've already mentioned, we'll be bringing you our live reaction as that top four is announced. We're patiently waiting. Um, so back to people discussing Georgia should stay in there, and here's my problem with that: if we ignore strength of schedule, or I guess not ignore it, but if we look at that especially, um, if Georgia ends up getting in over Florida State, I feel like that would be a bigger controversy than in Alabama getting in over Florida State because, again, as previously mentioned, Florida State went out and they scheduled a difficult opponent in LSU to start their season. If in Alabama, they scheduled a difficult opponent in Texas and vice versa, Texas, playing Alabama. We look at Georgia, Georgia didn't play anybody this year. They played an FCS school, they played 2 Group of 5 schools. The only Power 5 opponent they had was Georgia Tech, who finished the season 6-6, and they struggled against Georgia Tech in that game on the road. Um, so do you think it would be a bigger controversy to put Georgia in over FSU as compared to an Alabama over FSU? Even just ignoring the fact that, Georgia didn't win their conference title game, and it comes down to, Florida State did. Let's ignore the conference title part, and let's just look at that strength of record, strength of schedule part, between those 2 teams.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it all season. Georgia's, I'm not sure how their strength of schedule's 58th. That sounds ridiculous to me thinking about the teams they had on that schedule. Um, and Florida State, like we said, LSU first week. You know, now we've seen when these teams schedule these big games, they're, if at all possible, they're gonna schedule them week one because then it gives you an entire season to find your way back up into that, that top four. Whereas like Ohio State, Michigan, the loser of that is almost guaranteed to be out of the college football playoffs because they lose that. They're going to drop from wherever they were in that top four, usually outside of the top four, um, and then don't have a chance to redeem themselves unless the person who beat them happens to lose, which in that case usually isn't going to help your case anyway. Um, so yeah, to answer the question, if we're ignoring conference championship, um, and we're talking about Georgia undefeated versus Florida State undefeated, just off of resume alone, I think that you would have to put Florida State over Georgia. I understand they both have 3 ranked wins. You look at the 3 teams Florida State had versus the 3 teams that Georgia had. Those 3 ranked wins, in my eyes, Georgia has the slight edge on that. But it's the rest of the schedule to me that makes the difference because it's easier to get 3 ranked wins if you're playing scrubs the rest of the year than it is to, like you said, I think the ACC deserves more respect and Florida State deserves more respect for the ACC games that they did win. Where Georgia, like you said, struggled against Georgia Tech, which no disrespect to Georgia Tech, but I would take most of the ACC games that Florida State won and those teams that they beat over Georgia Tech any day. Um, so yeah, if we're, I mean, and really, in my opinion, if you add in those conference championships to the conversation, I think that hurts Georgia even more. I don't agree with people saying that Georgia should still be in here. I honestly would debate Georgia not even being in this conversation. I
Mhm.
think you could take Georgia out of this argument here, and I would be completely okay with that.
Yeah. And again, and I know I keep bringing this up, but I feel like it's important to stress that while it's nice to sit here and argue, well, we need to put the 4 best teams in and not the 4 most deserving. Again, when you try to figure out who that 4th best team is, it's going to be very self opinionated on who you think it is. And it's going to come down to who you think is the most deserving team. So, as much as we try to make that our battle cry and put our foot down and say we need the 4 best teams, it's so subjective and it's so hard to decide that you can't help but go look at resumes. You can't help but go look at your own subjective eye test and how these teams look. And that's when it's while it's nice to have that and champion that thought. It is so difficult to there's no clear cut I think favorite, and you can talk about how everybody looked in the last couple of weeks and so on and so forth. It's so hard to definitively say who the 4 best teams are without being, you know, personally subjective on how you decide or what criteria you use to decide who that fourth best team is. Um, so we're still sitting here waiting. It's saying that next up is they're going to reveal the four teams here at 12:30. They're going to interview. So I'm assuming within the next 5 minutes at least, we're going to get told who the four teams are going to be. And I'll go back here to the screen. Um, this is our prediction on who we think the playoff committee will pick to put in. I didn't talk about my picks here, and so let me do that quickly. Um, I put Washington over Michigan because, and I did this in um, who we said the 4 best teams were because I feel like Washington has a better resume across the board than what Michigan does. And I think with a convincing win over Oregon, I understand Oregon made it close. It was a 3-point game there late. But I think overall, Washington has proved that they were the better team in that matchup. I think the committee will see that. They'll look at, I don't want to say Michigan struggled with Iowa last night, but Iowa made it close, especially in the first half. Then Michigan started to pull away.
Shout out to the
Um,
under.
yeah. And that might be enough for the committee to put Washington over. But again, as we've stated before, it's very interchangeable there. And then Texas, especially with the head-to-head win over Alabama, I think they're in there. I think we're looking at who's getting that fourth spot. It's going to be Alabama or Florida State. Rankings are coming out right now. So Michigan is your number one team. So Michigan will be number one. I'll take being wrong on that. That's fine.
Yeah, it could have
Like we
gone
said,
either way, really.
that's interchangeable. So Michigan is our number one team. Stop talking and tell us the number two team. Oh my God! Now we got to show Jim Harbaugh and how he reacts to the news. So Michigan will be your number one team. Congratulations to the Wolverines again, and we're just probably going to keep reiterating this until they tell us who the number two team is. Michigan, Washington at number one, I feel like is very interchangeable. Obviously, they weren't going to end up playing each other somehow. So number two is coming out now. Should definitely be Washington. Oh my God, I have it muted, so I don't know like how much they're talking, but I can just imagine they're just rambling on and on right now.
Right.
So Washington, there we go. Washington locked in at number two.
I don't know. Literally, the only thing working right now is my computer, so I can't even watch it. But
I will say though, it would have been ironic in the final season of the Pac-12 for the Pac-10 or yeah the Pac-12 and the Big Ten champion to match up in the Rose Bowl, especially since that even if the conferences would have continued, that bowl tie-in is gone now because the Rose Bowl is always going to be in the semifinals or the finals. Um, so that would have been just kind of the cherry on top to send the
right.
Pac-12 off into the sunset with the Big Ten Pac-12 matchup in the Rose Bowl once again. But nonetheless, congratulations to Washington. Number 3 is Texas, and again, I feel like I thought that was going to be the case. And the conversation is around who is that fourth team? Is it Florida State? Is it Alabama? Texas is going to be your number 3 team. Washington, Texas, a rematch of the bowl game from last year. If you remember, they played in the Alamo Bowl last year. That was a fantastic football game. I'm excited to see that matchup again this year. That's going to be a fun time. So that'll be your Rose Bowl matchup most likely, and that's going to be a fun showdown in Pasadena. Texas has a long history of playing in the Rose Bowl too. They won the national championship there in 2005. They almost won their second one against Alabama. I believe that was '09. So congratulations to Texas. So here we go. The number 4 team for this year's playoff is going to be. It's going to be. Oh my God! They pulled up the resumes. Come on, ESPN.
Oh Jesus. Look, we don't care. Like we've already been
We just
staring at the
yeah,
resumes.
we just talked about resumes for 20 or especially ESPN. You just talked about resumes for 20 minutes. Like
Right.
just show us the fourth team. You don't need to do it
Yeah.
again and drag this out. Just tell us the
But
fourth
yeah.
team. Oh, for the love of God.
I'm almost glad I couldn't bring it up at this point.
Well, while we're waiting, what is your New Year's Six wish list? What is a New Year's Six matchup that you want to see?
So actually, there's been a lot of talk. Well, I shouldn't say a lot of talk. It might just be in Penn State fan pages.
Wait, I'm sorry. Here we go.
Um,
Here we go. I'm sorry. Don't mean to cut you off, but
you're good.
No way. Oh, okay. That was 6. Oh my god. They went to 6. The 4 is still open, and then it just flashed Georgia's logo, and I was like, "You gotta be kidding me right now. Like, there is no way they did this." Oh my god, the heart attacks. Georgia's your number 6 team. I don't know why. Again, I have it muted, so I can't hear what they're talking about. I just saw Georgia's logo flash, and I was like, "Are you serious?" I was about to start screaming.
Oh my.
Georgia's your number 6 team. My heart is beating right now. My team is eliminated, and my heart's racing. This is why I fucking love this sport, man.
Right.
Oh, my whole chest hurts. Alabama is in at number 4. Alabama is your number 4 team. Florida State is gonna be number 5. Um, Nick, your
Oh, so
thoughts,
look.
your instant reaction. Give me your instant reaction.
Instant reaction is first of all, it makes me feel really good because other than Michigan, Washington, which again interchangeable, I, they went with what I would have went with, which one makes me feel good about somebody who does these podcasts, watching this sport, and trying. Obviously, I'm wrong a whole hell of a lot, but makes me feel good. But I think that the college football committee got it right. Obviously, like I said, I went with basically what they went with minus the top two, which I feel like is the 4 best teams in college football at this moment. So, congrats, committee. I'm sure you're going to get a lot of hate mail because there's people who aren't going to agree with you. But I think that they did what they were supposed to do and got the 4 best teams into the college football playoff.
Okay, and actually, so they put the matchups on the screen. Washington and Texas are gonna play in the Sugar Bowl. Michigan, Alabama is gonna be in the Rose Bowl. And so those are the matchups. So Michigan and Alabama will play first on January 1st. That's gonna be on at 5 Eastern on ESPN. And then the second game will be Washington versus Texas. But yeah, my instant thought again, I feel like Florida State deserved it. And I'm glad that the argument came down to Alabama versus Florida State because again, Georgia trying to wiggle the way into that argument, I didn't feel was right.
Right.
And so I'm glad the committee at least got that point right. And now there's gonna be rightfully upset Florida State fans because they did everything right. You know, they go
Right.
undefeated, they win their conference, and they scheduled a difficult SEC. They played 2 SEC opponents, but they scheduled a very difficult SEC opponent in LSU. You know, it's not their fault LSU couldn't play defense against Alabama, or excuse me, they couldn't play defense against Ole Miss, or Jaden Daniels got hurt against Alabama. Alabama's able to pull away late in that game. So Florida State fans are going to be rightfully upset because, again, they did everything right. This team did everything right, and now they're being punished because of an injury, which I've stated I don't feel like is fair. Um, but at the same time, it's hard to argue that the committee got this wrong because Alabama has looked much improved, and I think the cherry on top is the fact that they go out and they beat the number 1 team in the country, the team that was so
Right.
highly valued the past couple of weeks, and they turn around and they beat that number 1 team. Um, but yeah, and so Slade just commented, the playoff committee said Michigan's penalty for sign stealing is being dealt Nick Saban on January 1st, which is very fitting. But so that is our instant reaction. I would still like to see the rest of the rankings. I want to know where everybody else is, and I
Right.
really want to see the New Year's Six matchups get announced here. So we're gonna stay with you guys through all that. I will update this graphic here. So Nick, feel free to continue expressing your thoughts, so I have time to put this graphic together for everybody.
Oh yeah. Okay. So oh, New Year's Six. So yeah, I don't know if this has been all over college football talk or if this has just been in Penn State fan pages. But the talk right now is after Georgia losing Penn State and Georgia in, I believe, everybody was saying the Peach Bowl, if I remember correctly. I'm not gonna lie, I don't know exactly how that all works out. I know it's not necessarily definitive with everything, but I am kind of looking forward to that because I feel like those matchups are relatively. I don't want to say that Penn State is as good as Georgia. That's not what I'm saying at all. But as far as matchups go, top defenses, offense that kind of rely on run game, tight end. I think it could be a good matchup. So I'd say as far as New Year's Six, that's kind of what I'm looking forward to. Um, always the group of five in the New Year's Six. Hopefully that happens. I think that it should. Um, but yeah, I think that this is crazy because we talked all year about we finally felt like there was parity in college football,
Mhm.
and we've gotten it with the way that the season is shaken out and the way that the college football playoff is going to be laid out. And yeah, it's this is why we love the sport, and we had a feeling that this season was gonna have drama and was gonna have excitement, and it is delivered, and it is a great way to lead us into what what might feel like a completely different sport next year, when we're talking about the Pac 10, Pac 12. There we go. Not being a thing, and the way the Big Ten is shaped up now with half the Pac 12 coming over there. Um, it's uh it's a great segue to lead us into all that, the 12-team playoff. Um, it's exciting. I like where college football is going. I feel like for a couple years, or for the past couple years, we might as well have just had a Bama Georgia championship game minus a few like Ohio State that one year and whatnot. Um, but I love it. This is why we watch. This is why we do this podcast every week, and it's great to be here and get to witness this. And I'm excited to see how these playoffs go.
Yeah, it's gonna be I I feel like this is gonna be the best 14 playoff we've ever had, and I'm excited to see it. It's gonna be very interesting to see, Michigan's defense go up head to head against this Alabama, high-powered offense that has come alive in the second half of the season. And then again, like we already said, Washington, Texas, a rematch of the bowl game last year. Texas looks much improved. Washington looks much improved. I think that's going to be the better game out of the two, just because. And while Michigan, they try to say they're a different team every year, I feel like they say they're a different team, but we get the same result every time. And I've made my case known the past couple weeks now that I feel like Big Ten defenses are slightly overvalued. And while it's still going to be a great, matchup head to head, I think I'm more looking forward to this Washington Texas matchup.
Oh,
Um,
definitely.
Back to what ESPN is talking about right now. For the love, just give us the rest of the rankings. Like they're still
Right.
talking about the Alabama Florida State. Like that's fine, and we can come back to this argument. But I want to know where everybody else is ranked right now. I
Yeah.
want to know what bowl games people are going to. Um, and while we have a minute of downtime, the Swear Jar Sweat will be back this year. We have not decided on a game yet. It's either going to be the Gasparilla Bowl again, which was a great time, or it's going to be the Cotton Bowl just because of how our work schedules and family schedules are working out this year. But once we have the official game, and we'll announce that later, the College Football Bowl Mania will be back again. That is our yearly contest that we've done now. So you go in to the ESPN and you pick your head-to-head matchups. Who you think is going to win every bowl game? The winner will get $75, and that's always a great time. So make sure you guys enter for that. Again, all those details will be announced later, and we'll make a TikTok about it. We'll promote it. And we had I felt like we had a really good turnout last year. I was really excited with the amount of people we had join us. Um, we ended up
Gotta
winning.
remember to turn it off. Oh,
Yeah,
that was
that
March
was 2 years
Madness,
ago.
wasn't it? Oh,
Yeah, that
two
was
years
2
ago.
years
That's what it
ago,
was. Yeah.
yeah. And yeah, then the person came, like, "Oh, where's my money?" It's like, "Well, listen." I mean, we still paid them, but,
Yeah.
um, no, it's a good time. But, yeah, I was impressed with the turnout last year. I hope it's even more this year. I think that'll be very fun. So hopefully everybody joins us over there. Um, Still just sitting here waiting,
Still waiting. All right. I'm gonna take this opportunity
begging
to
for the
walk
rest of
away
these
for a
rankings.
second, but
Yeah,
but I will
go
be
ahead.
back.
Yeah, go ahead. So, for those of you still with us, drop your thoughts down below in the comments. What do you think on the playoff Final Four? Or the graph you see on the screen is what the committee said. Georgia is ranked number 6. Florida State is at 5, and it's going to be a great. And Nick and I were just talking about this. It's going to be a great showdown between these four schools. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch. But if you're joining us, first of all, thank you. But drop a comment down below. If you're a fan of one of these four teams, let us know how you're feeling. Are you excited for your matchup? It's going to be a great time. We are just hanging out, waiting for the rest of the rankings to come out. We are a big big group of or I'm the biggest. But we do love ourselves some group of 5 football, so we're waiting to see who the group of 5 representative for the New Year Six is gonna be. There's some debate between SMU with their big win on the road over Tulane versus the undefeated Liberty. So we're waiting to see all that. Right now, ESPN is still just kind of babbling on about the top 4 teams. And while again, it's exciting, I want to see more. Let's talk about the rest of the rankings here. I am checking ESPN's app right now just to see if they put out the rest of the rankings, and they have not yet. I just want to say, so I'm sitting here, I'm watching, and Joey Galloway's giving his thoughts on the rankings. I didn't listen to what Booger McFarland said, but he had given his thoughts on it. And just listening to what Joey Galloway is saying is, I guess Booger was using the term "we" to describe everybody on this ESPN panel, and how they felt about the matchups, and thoughts on, I guess, maybe some SEC bias within the College Football Playoff Committee. Um, I absolutely love Joey Galloway. I think he is one of the most underrated ESPN college football personalities. He is one of the smartest guys on this panel right now, and the way he speaks about college football and the game as a whole, I think is very undervalued. And I just want to go on the record of saying that I don't think Joey Galloway gets enough attention, enough love that he deserves, and I am a huge fan of what he does on ESPN. He is one of my favorite on-air personalities for that network. Um, Still waiting to see the rest of these rankings with bated breath. Excited to see what matchups we do get here um, for the other New Year's Six bowls. It's as an Oregon fan, and with Nick and Slade being Penn State fans, they just showed the Florida State reaction to them being held out of the playoffs. Again, heartbreak for them. Um, because what did they do wrong? And that's the hardest part to take from all of this is what did they do wrong to be held out of the playoffs? And again, there's all the arguments all around, but that sucks for that team. They go undefeated. They beat two SEC schools, one of them being very good, a ranked school. Um, and I really hope at the end of the day, the point I've been trying to make is I hope this isn't about Jordan Travis's injury. That is not fair to this team. It's not fair to college football that a team is held out because a player got hurt. That's just not how it's supposed to work. And so I certainly hope that wasn't the case. Most likely played some factor into it. And as I said earlier, I think the other factor going into it is the fact that Alabama beat the number one team, the team that's been number one for so many weeks now. But again, I am very, very heartbroken for Florida State, and that team because they didn't do anything wrong at the end of the day, and that's what I'm getting at. They deserve a lot more. Maybe they'll get matched up with Georgia in a bowl game. And like one of our commenters said earlier, they're going to play each other. If Florida State wins that, they can turn out, they can claim a national title. We shall wait and see what happens there. Um, I don't know when they're going to put out the rest of the rankings. That's what we're kind of waiting for right now. They're talking to Boo Corrigan, the chair of the College Football Playoff Committee right now. He's explaining his thoughts on the rankings and why they did what they did. Then they're going to interview all the coaches. So I don't know at what point they were going to release, according to the timer here. this is going to be a 4-hour show. We are obviously not going to stay with you guys for the full 4 hours. We'll most likely just put out a video later on our thoughts with the rankings that get the rest of the rankings, and then the New Year's Six matchups we get. Um, so we really appreciate everybody for joining us this morning. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. This was the most anticipated, I think, college football playoff reveal that we've had since the 14 playoff started. Next year, we're going to 12 teams, which is going to be interesting to say the least. And we talked about that yesterday and gave our thoughts on it. But congratulations to these four schools: Michigan, Alabama, Washington, and Texas. It's going to be an exciting 14 playoff. We're excited to see how it goes, and we're gonna have to wait till January 1st. That's the sad part, but there's gonna be plenty of college football in between. We will be live, or excuse me, not live. Um, Thursday morning, we post Blitz Boys, which is our weekly college football podcast. We're gonna talk even more about this, and we're also gonna talk about everything else. And then next Saturday morning at 9 a.m., we will be live for Out of the Tunnel. We're gonna preview a bunch of other bowl games. We're gonna do 6 bowl games this year and preview those for you. And then we're also going to talk Army Navy. So make sure you join us over there Saturday morning. Thank you, as always, for checking us out and spending your Saturday or Sunday afternoon with us. Go enjoy your day of NFL football, and we will see you guys in the next video.